We face many points of inflection in our careers and our lives, from new jobs and promotions to difficult bosses and layoffs. If we had all the time and resources possible, we could certainly figure it out eventually, but we don't. The challenge is that we're walking into roles where expectations are sky high, timelines are crunched, and there isn't much patience. So you need an accelerator, and that's exactly where coaching can help. Think of coaching as a catalyst for your success. In Coaching Ahas, we share stories of leaders, their courage and vulnerability to lean into coaching, and the breakthroughs that change their lives forever. Welcome to Coaching Ahas, where we share real stories of talented coaches and clients, one aha at a time. My guest today is Janet Harvey, past president and master certified coach at the International Coaching Federation, and author of bestsellers Invite Change and her latest must read, From Tension to Transformation. Janet, welcome. So excited to dig into Coaching Ahas with you today.
Oh, me too. And I just love the name of your podcast. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so our goal here is to share stories of leaders and their breakthroughs. So paint the picture for us. What was this leader going through and why did they come to you?
A female leader,
Mm-hmm.
very, very, very experienced, well regarded in the industry, promoted to head up the R&D role. She is also being added into the executive committee. Multinational, they
Wow.
work all over the world, right?
Mhm.
Big promotion. And she engaged me 45 days before she was to step into the role officially because she was suffering from imposter syndrome. It's
Ah.
probably quite common, right?
Mm.
Only my point of view about imposter syndrome is that it shows up in the moment when we're being asked by our own soul and spirit to step into bigger shoes.
Yes.
It
So
keeps
true.
alert, right? There's a high side to the imposter syndrome. Of course, she came to me wondering, how am I ever going to do this? And how do I not put my foot in my mouth? And how do
Right.
I show up the right way? And how do I make sure the team doesn't mutiny? Right. She had a much longer list of all of the
Yeah.
doubts in her attachment and recognition of
Mm.
her preparedness. She was ready for this role.
Mm.
So, in a lot of ways, the coaching conversation is about helping people restore their sense of wholeness. Hang on a second.
Mm.
Right now, you're focused here and all the things that are creating the tension, but what about all the rest of who you are?
Right.
Huh? So, much of what we worked on in the early going was helping her to tip the scales back into balance.
Mm.
Let's inventory who you are. And now let's talk about what have you allowed to influence from the system, your own internal system and all the external demands on you that has you forgetting, has you discounting your readiness for this role.
Mm.
It's a big role. The organization is promoting you into it. They clearly see that you are ready and capable.
Right.
What don't you believe about it?
Mm.
That became a very seminal question for her. You're right.
Mm.
I don't believe it. I don't believe I'm worthy. I don't believe I've earned it. I don't believe I'm ready.
Mm.
What is your evidence to support that?
Yeah.
Well, I don't. It's just a feeling. And I said, are you available to find out by asking questions of your peers and your subordinates to help you get the reality of how people experience you? So that led to a series of questions that she generated in our coaching sessions and then went away and collected data. And slowly but surely, she found her center again. Right?
Mm.
She's like, okay, yes, I earned this opportunity. Yes, I'm ready. Yes, I have the right skills to match to it. Now, how do I ensure that I deliver on what everybody sees in me?
Yeah.
Can you hear the cycle, right? It's like, okay, we got one reality check only to have all those doubts come
Yeah.
back again. And this is the nature of coaching. It's an evolutionary, emergent experience. And so we took it one thing at a time. So the
Yeah.
introductory video,
Mm.
she wrote her script. We spent some time looking at language and how
Yes.
language has to translate across multicultures and stages of development. She had longtime employees and brand new folks. There were brand new people on the executive committee.
Yeah.
She was in a scientific role in a scientific company where everybody thought they were the smartest person in the room. So how does she assert her authority?
Mm.
Language is part of it, delivery is part of it. She practiced with me. So, you
Yeah.
know, the coaching is always going to ask the question, what is it you're wanting to address or resolve in our discussion today so that you can do something different out there?
Yeah.
And so, from the introductory video, then there was a town hall she was going to do, and she needed to bring her strategy for the year to the
Hmm.
first XCOM meeting. These were all opportunities for her to remind herself,
Yeah.
I am worthy, I am enough, I am ready, I am excited, and I can stand in my own
Yeah.
power with whomever I'm in the room with.
Mm.
Um,
I love this story for so many reasons. Partly because it's so common and so many of us do go through that period of self-doubt,
yeah,
right? And feeling like, oh my God, do I really deserve this? Am I the right person, right? Will they figure out that they hired the wrong person? And all
exactly.
of those questions, I think, that do plague you before you start a new job, especially one that is a step up or one that is a significant challenge, right? And I think what's really interesting about this is that the leader recognized that she needed help,
Mhm.
which is not common, right? Because, often I think, we don't diagnose ourselves necessarily, but often we sort of have that feeling of discomfort and just leave it be
Mhm.
instead of finding a way to address it.
Right.
So I think the fact that she reached out, right, to actually address it, I think already sets her apart from many of her peers. The second is that I think the way you narrated the story of really the journey that she went through,
Mhm.
not just recognizing, right, that she had this self doubt that didn't come from evidence, but that just came from emotion
Mhm.
and almost converting that emotion to data in some ways to figure out what could be done. I think the third really myth, probably, that you dispelled here is that I think a lot of people think of coaching as a warm and fluffy thing that's like, degenerates to a fireside chat sometimes. And that's not at all what coaching is about. What you spoke is about figuring out with her, right, what was the real issue at the heart of what she was facing. And then how was that translating into her behavior at work, whether it's in giving a presentation, giving her intro, setting up her team, whatever those real actual outcomes were, and helping her really be able to be effective and successful in those. Thank you for sharing this example. Fantastic. Uh, there's so many breakthroughs that she had through the journey, right? Is there one particular one that stands out for you that sort of really got her past her limiting beliefs?
The first really big breakthrough for this leader was recognizing the allyship of her doubt.
Mm.
That throughout her entire career, she had been thrust into roles, in her opinion, early,
Ah, okay.
before she was ready.
Hmm.
And others could see the potential that she was not accepting in herself. And
Hmm.
so she pushed herself so hard in order to overachieve and
Right,
make
right.
sure that nobody figured out that she had doubt. And she was far enough along in her career to realize that her responsibility was to have faith in herself. Nobody else was going to do it for her.
Yeah,
And that led to some
that's
really
powerful.
practical, right? Really practical things like
Yeah.
how are you working with your executive assistant around managing your calendar?
Hmm.
If your team isn't rising into bigger roles and capacities, you cannot rise into bigger roles and
Right.
capacities. And if you're rescuing them, you're dropping back into your doubt in your people. If you have the wrong people, fix the people, change the
Right.
team. This isn't about you being redundant with them or rescuing them. Either
Yeah.
one of these things just reinforces your doubt, not your faith.
Yeah.
So she was learning to calibrate, right? Am I taking this action, having this interaction with a team member or a peer out of my doubt or out of my faith? And that was about intention.
Mm.
So what's the experience I want to have in this meeting? I want a decision at the end of the meeting. I want to hear the other person's point of view. I'm going to initiate with curiosity to collect information, and I'm going to create partnering because we can't go forward and implement the decision if we're not in alignment. That was
Right.
a completely different way of orienting because she wasn't trying to prove anything. She was worthy. So
Imagine that. Oh my
I
goodness.
think that's the big one.
Yeah.
And then I think the next one really was she pulled people down off their pedestal. She
Mm.
let herself be a little more vulnerable and a little more human in her conversations with the president,
Mm.
who she dearly respected and absolutely adored,
Mm.
and was a little afraid of. And so as we looked at what she was afraid of, she felt like weakness. I couldn't show weakness. And I
Mm.
said, "What is weakness?" We had a wonderful conversation about how she was holding that word, how she was holding vulnerability.
Right, right.
And I said, "What do you admire about the president that has you have him up on a pedestal as almost superhuman, not as ordinary human as you are?" And as she started to explore that, she realized what she valued was his humanity, his love, his kindness, his caring, and his directness. When
Yeah.
it said, he said it. There was no beating around the bush, but it was always said with respect. And
Mm.
I said, "Do you remember the principle of projection?" One finger pointing out, three back at you. What you see in another is in you. You just
Yes.
aren't claiming it. That was a mind blower for her. And we began to examine all the places where she'd been, all those qualities she was assigning to the president.
Yeah.
She'd been that way with her team. And I said, "And what did that require of you?" And she said, "Being transparent about my own humanity, my
Yeah.
relationship with my husband when I travel like crazy, my relationship with my kids when I travel like crazy,
Yeah.
and burn the midnight oil to get something done." And I said, "Yes, it's your humanity that people connect with, that
Yeah.
deep connection that the workforce of today is so craving. That's wholeness, right? Not just my professional competence, but who I am at my level of values."
Yeah.
So as she began to feel comfortable to be a bit more transparent with the president, they ended up having a quality of friendship and collegiality.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And of course, that rippled out to everybody else on XCOM.
That's really cool. And again, there's so many learnings. What strikes me is that both of these points are like crossroads in some ways, right? And the leader is consciously making a choice to go down the journey, which is a bit uncomfortable for sure, which is challenging, but yet they know that hopefully really facing some of those fears is going to get them to a better place. Because you see the opposite so often in organizations, right? Which is that, you feel self-doubt or imposter syndrome. You are basically working harder and harder to prove yourself, right? And often that harder and harder looks like two things, right? It looks like busyness, which is filling your day with activity and overwhelming and burning out, right? Or it looks like trying to do everything yourself and really not having your team, right, have the ownership and responsibility or growth for that matter, right? And,
That's a
almost
really key
stifling
point,
that.
right? So that was another idea for her. She realized they have a very aggressive agenda for the
Yeah.
art group, and she can't scale
Hmm.
to fulfill that agenda if her
Right.
team doesn't get developed.
Yeah.
So that was where the tension actually created the breakthrough for her. It's like someone got to give here. I got to stop doing, and I have to be leading, and I have to be developing, and that
Yeah.
means I need to reconfigure how I allocate my priorities. And simple things like a calendar audit and changing the way her EA was accepting meetings and
Right. Right.
expecting people to show up with pre-reads. If, what do you want out of this meeting? Instead of setting the agenda for
Yeah.
her directs were setting the agenda with her. That was a mind blower. And these seem like really simple things, but when we're caught in the emotionality
Yes.
of, oh my gosh, how do I measure up? We forget.
We forget. That is truly powerful. I had a leader once who I was coaching, senior leader, very, very talented, very well regarded by his team. But, he had this tendency of whenever there was like a critical project or something that was not going well, he had a tendency to take over, right? And so, when I asked him, right, that, what does it say about your team when you just take over? What do you think they're reading into it? And that was like such a mind blower for him because he was like, oh my God, they think I don't trust them. I was like, "Yeah, right."
Yeah.
And so that really sort of opened up a conversation. But this is such a great example.
You're actually bringing up something I think is important for your listeners,
Yeah.
which is cognitively, we're not talking about complex things.
Right.
Pretty straightforward and pretty simple. And when asked the question, it breaks the spell of
Yes.
the emotionality that the leader is in, and they cognitively realize, okay, yes, my team would take that as mistrust.
Hmm.
Coaches can't stop there
Exactly.
because there's some habit, preference, assumption, bias, some autopilot that has them behave
Yes.
they do. And that has to be deconstructed. And this is the
Exactly.
work that coaches do for a leader to realize, okay, I have a belief
Yeah.
that unless I do this, this won't happen, right? Fill in the blank. How true is that? What's the evidence for that?
Yes.
And
Yes.
will it get you where you want to go? And the answer is going to be
Exactly.
no. Okay. How will you evolve that belief system?
Yeah.
What behaviors would that unleash for you? And okay, you've got the insight. It's not your intellect anymore, it's internal insight.
Yes.
What will you accept responsibility to implement from this?
Right.
So it's pragmatic on the other side of that inner work.
The aha moment is almost the start of the journey, not the end of it. I want to talk about your latest book, From Tension to Transformation. It is so timely, Janet. We see leaders facing intense pressures, headwinds, all kinds of stress at work as well. Some of it potentially coming from priorities conflict, role conflicts, values conflicts, identity conflicts, and God alone knows what else, right? I'd love to know a little bit about, uh, what are some of the most common tensions you see leaders facing, right, which pull them in opposing directions?
Yeah,
And could you share a few examples of it?
sure. So there are seven core dilemmas that are talked about in the book, and that really came from research with leaders and kind of looking for the patterns. So,
Mm.
what were some of the common ones? I'm going
Right.
to give you one of the seven in particular: control and agility. The first response, neurobiologically for us, is to protect. And what is that? That's control. Let me control my territory. Let me control
Mm.
my relationships. And I'm thinking about an executive who leads a spinoff from a larger company. Really cool, innovative product. A little high risk, maybe a little early to market. Lots and lots and lots of attention of tension for him between control and agility. They need to be agile because they're building a market and
Mm.
building innovative product to go to that market. But they also have a very conservative board in order to keep happy. And that means kind of reining in some of the creatives that are involved in this spinoff
Right.
company. Well, he finally found himself in a board meeting when the conservative parent was not delivering on the contract. There are things that they needed to infuse in the form of assets to his company, and it wasn't happening.
Mm.
And their culture is kind and respectful. Don't ruffle any feathers. Board meetings should be very harmonious. And he needed to throw a grenade in the room.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that was not about control. That was
Right.
totally about agility, and it was high risk agility.
Mm.
But here's the thing: he has a fiduciary duty as well. So there is a structure that he has to live within, a system in which there is a set of rules that cannot be crossed. That if you cross that line, then he becomes a violator of the contract. And the fact that he has a judgment about their non-performance doesn't
Mm.
help him any. he spent most of a session railing. Sometimes I'll say, you have 10 minutes. You can kvetch as long as you like for 10 minutes. As long as you like for 10 minutes. You heard me, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do the work. Okay. So ultimately, what he realized is that he knew this was coming.
Hmm.
This was coming many months before this board meeting that he was preparing for. And he let it go. And I said, so who is the accountable party?
Hmm.
Well, it is true that they are not delivering the asset we need. But it's also true that I didn't find out the reason why.
Hmm.
I gave that responsibility to somebody at the parent organization.
Ah,
I didn't take responsibility to go find out what was in the way. I said, exactly. So, what do you do now? And that the solution is a little bit of have some humility, a little humble pie,
yeah.
um, but not let go of the seed inside the hubris. The seed inside the hubris is there's a problem. They
Yeah.
have some resistance around what needs to happen here, and you haven't gotten to the bottom of it. So, how do you go and eat some humble pie and say, help me find out what's at the bottom of this? Because our shared purpose is tied up in the success of the spinoff.
Yeah.
Now, I can't go to market without this asset. It's a barrier. Now it's not personal. So all of the feelings he had about they don't like me, they're going to fire me, they want to replace me, and like the laundry list was long, that all goes away because he's taken some time to pull back and gain some perspective of how are control and agility operating here, and how did I let myself set my tool bag down and
Yeah.
not accept my responsibility for the authority, not only my inner authority to stay engaged, but how I let them not exercise their authority and I didn't say anything, even though I knew it.
Yeah.
Right?
What's really cool about this story is also that, our emotions impact how we act and we don't know it, right? So anger often makes us see things as black and white rather than as a spectrum, right? So either it's control or agility, either they want to help me or not, right? Or they're trying to fire me. Not that it's a spectrum and, maybe we are just at different points on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And how can we find common ground and get closer?
Yeah.
And as the world gets more and more VUCA, I guess that's the kind of leader we need who was able to see things as a spectrum and figure out how to find common ground, how to be the integrator. Finding that space to pause, reflect, and be intentional, right, gets you to a far better place for your business, for yourself in alignment to your values, and certainly, hopefully, for the world at large, right?
You know, one of the one of the realizations I had about 10 years into my work was that the word reflection, I think we take for granted as business
Yes.
people that people know what that is. And I think there's three micro skills that most leaders don't practice.
Hmm.
So I've integrated this into my work on a regular basis. And the first is noticing when something has distracted you.
Hmm.
There's a great Scottish psychologist who says, um, when we fail to notice that we fail to notice, that is the reason we cannot change, right? I'm paraphrasing a little
Right,
bit.
right.
This is again, our neurobiology likes habit and preference, and we operate out of that bias until something goes boom. But why do we need boom? If we were a little bit more alert to ourselves, pause always gives more time than it takes. We have that opportunity to say, in that meeting, something caught my attention. We went right by it. But as I'm reflecting on that
Yeah.
meeting, I'm realizing, that's something to go check out. And I can bust up attention before it becomes conflict. And to
Yes.
me, this is the proactive piece. Now, first is noticing. That's the first micro skill. The second micro skill is what's the reason I noticed it? Like, what in me
Mm.
got activated? Was that a values conflict? Was that a belief system clash? Was
Right.
somebody acting out of character, right? It could be all kinds of things. What was the reason? And then the third is to ask the question. There might be more than one, two or three or four, and of whom?
Hmm.
That's the sequence of steps. that breaks the spell of habit, preference, assumption, and bias.
Mm,
And to me, this is empowerment for leaders to see the benefit of
mm.
pausing for reflection to get perspective. And
I love that. Oh my goodness. That was like mind blowing. Could you share an example of just walking through how that reflection would be for someone?
sure. Um, I'm thinking of a young woman who is on the succession path to be CEO. And she and the CEO are like complete opposites on any personality instrument you would give them. I don't work with personality, I work with wholeness.
Right.
So part of what we've been doing is helping her to see the qualities in the president that are her development edge
Mm,
and helping her to language with her president the things that he could develop that are her strengths so that they're a better team.
mm,
Because right now they're doing a little bit of a tug of war.
hmm.
And not helpful to either one's productivity, really
Right.
not helpful to the rest of the C-suite that's watching this go on. Unfortunately, at the moment, the board doesn't seem to know that it's occurring, but we don't want that to
Right.
happen. So, a lot of what we're doing in her work is I have her keeping track of when she notices her attention's getting pulled away.
Mm,
Who was it with? What were you talking about? What was the language that you heard? What was the relevance you made to it?
mm,
And then when she comes to the session, we talk about, so from where within you did that arise?
mm,
Was your values conflict? What was your limiting belief? In other words, it's a deconstruction process in the coaching
mm.
conversation. And then ultimately, all right, what's the missing information? Maybe there was a series of missing conversations because you
Right.
just revealed to yourself that there were some assumptions being made about who knew what. And you're upset about the result, but the problem was way back here, right? If you don't like the result, some action happened. You
Right.
go back another step and go, well, how did we make that decision? And then you got to go back another step and say, and what was the premise? What did we believe?
Yeah.
That had us make that decision that caused those actions that created that result. That's a reflection process. And then ultimately, now that you're aware that you were not seeing the whole picture as it actually is, how do you want to go forward? What's the new belief?
Yeah.
How would that fuel a different decision? And almost always the answer was, I have no idea. I said, great. I validate, I don't know on a regular basis. And I said,
I love
you
that.
might know. What are the people that you want to bring into this conversation, and what questions will you invite them to answer that helps all of you be
Mm.
the smartest people in the room?
Love that. Love that. I often say that, as leaders, we think we are busy and effective, but are we sometimes just too busy to be effective?
I think that's great. I will be quoting you. That's great.
Absolutely, please do. And I have to say that reflection is one of those things that can really help you sort out stuff that is in your mind,
Mhm.
right? And, to paraphrase Oprah, I guess the chaos in your mind often reflects in terms of the chaos in your life. It
That's right.
generates, I should say, the chaos in your life. And
Mhm.
so, if you have to go back to it, you really have to focus on the reflection, the introspection that hopefully gets you some of that clarity that can help you guide actions more intentionally.
Yes, yes, yes. And you're bringing up another really important point that's part of the value proposition of coaching.
Mm,
When we're not deliberate and purposeful about how we approach something,
mm.
breakdown happens. And those breakdowns require costly allocation of resources to
Yeah.
fix.
What drew you to the world of coaching and why is it so important to you? Because you not only coach leaders, you also coach coaches.
I had the great privilege to work for Charles Schwab and Company for 14 years. I sort of stumbled my way into Schwab, and at a great time in that company's history, I got to work in every division of the company. I built lines of business, I closed lines of business, I took us through the earthquake and the crash and going public, and wow, it was a ride. One day, one day, Chuck walked into the boardroom and said, I know we built this company on excellent customer service, and we hired people on that premise that they'd never have to sell or be put in a conflict of interest position. But I can see the future, and I know that what's important is that our people do sell and that they sell financial planning. So not only were we doing this countercultural project, but we were also doing a skill building lift that was like unheard of.
Right.
I got that project. And I had two really big problems to solve. One was the power dynamic. We'd hired a bunch of bankers who thought they knew what the right answer was and didn't really understand how our branches worked.
Mm.
Mhm. And I needed those branch people to be the voice of the customer, sitting side by side with those headquarters people without killing each other.
Yes.
I had to find a way to address that power dynamic.
Right.
And then, of course, we had the culture shift from service to sales. We had an 85% retention goal and we kept 96%. And 40%
Wow.
of people went to a new city to stand up our regional call centers. It was extraordinary. I will tell you that what we ended up creating was a team coaching approach to the
Mm.
entire initiative. And it's why I left. Once we got things underway and things were into talent systems, I just went to my boss and I said, look, I've been a renegade my entire career, and you all have loved having me be comfortable taking risks and doing things nobody's ever done before. But I'm not going to go to the executive level because I'm too much of a disruptor. So I'm going to go be an entrepreneur and see if I can do this again and again and again. Because what I saw is that people could get past their identity and their
Yes.
egos, their need to be right, and do something together in collaboration that was remarkable innovation and for the greater good.
Mm.
So I never looked back. That was in 1996. So I've been doing organizational consulting and executive and team coaching and development, organizational development, and then I bought a
Yeah.
coaching ed company in 2006. And so all of that blends together to create what I call a state of generative wholeness.
Mm.
How do people live from the inside out, loving their authentic self,
Mm.
negotiating their life from that place,
Yeah.
and learning the art of being a learner, originating thinking from it, translating that in a creative way, and producing something useful for the world? I
Mm.
figure that's my contribution to empower restoration of dignity and people really living a thriving life.
And why is that so important for you?
My coach says to me all the time, you were marked for life. And I said, yeah, I know. So I have a birthmark on my face. And from very little age, my parents decided to ignore it. That was their strategy for managing the disruption of it. You will be one and the same. But, my first day in kindergarten, that wasn't happening. I kind of figured out early that I either could crumble to that and feel ashamed and shy and introverted, or I could say, hang on a second. And I went the hang on a second route. And, it's a lifelong journey to realize that when I walk into a room, I hear people gasp, and I watch parents in the mall turn their kids away because the kids are curious, but mom and dad don't know what to do with it.
Ah,
And, I know that the more visible and
wow.
more I am available to stand for the dignity of everyone, for all of the diversity that we are, seen and unseen,
Mm.
the better humans we are together. And that's what I
That
care
is
about.
amazing. You found a path to let people see you, right? Outside of, you know, uh, just your appearance. And, no one should be judged on their appearance in any case, but being able to overcome what was happening and helping people see the real you, truly fascinating. And thank you so much for sharing
Well,
that
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
What's your favorite coaching question? I'm sure that's hard. That's a really hard question.
No,
You
actually,
had to pick one.
um, from where inside of you does this point of view arise?
I love that. Very cool. Very cool. This has been so much fun, so much wisdom, so much, such great stories, so much learning. Thank you so much, Janet, for joining us on Coaching Ahas. This was
Pleasure.
amazing.
You have a gift for interviewing and engaging with me. So we covered a lot of territory, and I'm
We
delighted
did.
that we could do that for your audience. Thank you.